What's up, humans? Today, we're speaking to Argentinian doctor Celestino Piotti, who is an anthropologist, a medical anthropologist who has dedicated his life to study remains of humans and other species too. He founded a specialty in medicine in Argentina, a whole major. I don't know if it's called a major or specialty or specialty studies. He's gonna explain everything because there are many things that he said that I honestly didn't understand. A lot of them I did, but I think that the most important part of this interaction is that he is one of the scientists who testified in the Mexican Congress, the second one, and some of the things he said there are very hard to digest. And I understand people that instantly jumped at this explanation that he gave. I wanted obviously to talk about those things that he said, which tie into a potential confirmation of Dr. Michael P. Masters' future human hypothesis, which is, I think he should watch this if anyone. And I think that the way he explained it, it did make sense to me. I'm a layman. I would love for people who are whose specialty is in mathematics and geometry and anthropology and everything the doctor does. I wish they heard this and explain to people why you believe he's wrong or why you believe he's right. That would be amazing because this was a really nice conversation. I didn't feel he was dishonest in any way, and I do feel a phenomenon with him that I saw in Dr. John Mack or Dr. Stanton Friedman, who, when they realized something was happening, when they saw evidence that convinced them, they never stopped trying to know more. And this is exactly the mindset in which Dr. Piotti is. And I think that's important to note. You'll recognize it when you see the conversation, but man, please like, comment, subscribe, share this thing, clip it, do whatever you can in order to get people to know Dr. Piotti and what he has to say. Whoever wants to refute anything, be my guest. Just be respectful. That's all I ask, to be honest with you. I know there's people who think they're respectful sometimes because they don't call names or anything like that. But there are ways of talking that make it sound like you're being disrespectful. And I think that's even you can see it in writing too. So we see you guys. Please be respectful in every way you can. It's free, you know. So yeah, if you want to support the channel, if you like this content and want to support the channel in any other way, I left a few links in the description. Any type of help is very much appreciated. And this is Dr. Celestino Piotti for Psicoactivo. What's up, humans? Welcome to a new episode of Psicoactivo. Today I have Dr. Celestino Piotti, who was, if I understand correctly, you were the founder of the specialty of forensic medicine in Argentina. No? I founded the specialty in medical physical anthropology in Argentina. That has nothing to do with it, at least here in Argentina. I don't know if in other countries it is possibly another concept, that of a forensic doctor. Look, it's good because I wanted to touch on this topic a little bit as well. In Argentina, not always in other countries, I do not know and respect the medical concepts that they have. But here in Argentina, the following happens. A doctor of any specialty who works for the forum is called a forensic doctor. In other words, a forum recalling the Roman forum, which was the ancestor of laws in the world, right? Because of Roman law and all those things, let's say the basis of current laws. So saying forensic doctor in Argentina means that it is a doctor who works from his specialty for the court or for the judiciary.
What we call a forensic doctor here would be the specialty of the doctor specializing in legal medicine, who is the one who does autopsies and all those things, who also works in courts. So, for example, I, who worked in the judicial branch of Cordoba in the province of Cordoba for 35 years, have already retired, Swaitosendain. Well, I'm a specialist in occupational medicine and a specialist in medical physical anthropology. And yet working in the judiciary, I was a court doctor, which would be synonymous with saying forensic doctor, but I am not a forensic doctor. The specialty of legal medicine in Argentina means a single chapter within the specialty of medical physical anthropology. For example, the medical examiner does not know how to measure bones. The anthropologist does realize it. Okay? So, well, that's just to clarify, because I listened to another program of yours and the forensic doctor is mentioned a lot. Well, in Argentina, it would simply be by working near the forum or in the forum. That is, working in justice, the judicial branch. Okay, thank you very much for the clarification of all the preparation you have. Which of your specialties are best suited to your study with bodies? Well, in the specialty in anthropology and physics, medical physics is the one that directly, let's say, we would almost say is specific to me, because it is the only way I have to measure bones. For example, to give you an idea, I am not dedicated to measuring or studying, for example, lifeless but complete bodies, that is, with the soft parts. I study the skeletal remains. Logically, in the case of mummies, it is an exception because the soft part is in a different state, right? Yeah, because of diatomaceous earth, right? Well, diatomaceous earth has presented itself in this unique case for me. I have not had other cases where a mummy has been preserved by diatomaceous earth. It's rare. It's very rare. So, or the first time, what happens? Look, in Argentina, diatomaceous earth is known to be used in homemade methods to kill insects. For example, scorpions that appear, and all insects that have external shells and internal lymph fluid. Well, the diatom is a dust, let's say, of prehistoric algae that clogs the pores of these insects and kills them, dries them out. So what is known in Argentina about Atomiland is that it is used to kill insects. Now, whoever used it to preserve these mummies, let's say he did a very special technique, one technique that has proven to be very useful in so many years of conservation. Okay, I wanted to ask you how you first became involved in the case, if you can take us a little bit there. Well, this has a little history where before the time of the pandemic, more or less, when these mummies first appeared as discovered by scientists who had seen them, well, I saw them on the internet and I didn't take them to heart. No, I tell you honestly, for me, they didn't catch my attention. I didn't even get involved in seeing if they were really true or not. Directly for me, it didn't catch my attention at all, because let's say I was used to studying the remains of our human partners. Well, I have done it all my life. So, well, then the pandemic happens. It arrives at the beginning of 2023 last year. And as a result of these issues being raised again, I think a person in my family contacted Mr. Hemi Mosan or one of them, and he says, look, I know this person who maybe could collaborate with something using of these things. Then they contact me, and from that moment on, let's say I started doing a little research to get an answer. And when I achieved the first measurements, I began to see things as they were. I began to worry very much because they were things that I had never seen. I had never believed. I did not imagine that I was going to be measuring such species, new humans, right? So, well, as I was learning, because for me and for everyone, I think it has been a new thing. I started, as they say, opening my mind to these things, and I started to not be able to sleep at night because after I did a measurement and it was time for the night to sleep, to rest. I couldn't sleep because I kept thinking about how I had achieved that measurement. It couldn't be. So when I had a little response, a little bit of work done on the measurements, which I'm going to tell you how they were, how I used the method, well, I contacted Mr. Mosan and told him yes, that I could offer some modest study to collaborate. And he tells me, well, send me a video explaining something short, and when we have the meetings in the Chamber of Deputies, I will send you your video so that you can collaborate from afar, let's say through video, with the investigations. Well, I sent the video and the answer was no, come here. So of course, then I already said, well, thank goodness I already have all my angles measured and how to start. And I brought a 3-page report written by hand typed to present there in the Chamber of Deputies. Well, Mr. Mosang gave me very careful attention since he paid for all my trips, my stay. He made me available, a person with transportation, to get me between the scientific meetings we had and the hotel where I was and all that. I traveled with my wife. They welcomed us as if we were friends from 40 years ago. So when I returned to Argentina, I had new friends made in Mexico, and I came with a peace of mind seeing that all the collaborators, all the scientists, they were all pulling in the same direction. That is, they all had the same conclusions, that they were biological beings, that they were not replicas, nor that they were good. They were living beings, which had been how many scientists there were. Is that more or less the number? Well, more than 10, 12. The truth is that I didn't count them, but on the stand there are several, and the majority, others, let's say, I knew via the internet, right? But with what I was there, I felt very comfortable because we all thought the same way. And that in this type of research, which I believe is going to be the most important discovery in the life of Homo sapiens sapiens, it is essential that everyone is thinking more or less the same thing, especially those of us in medicine. It isn't true, which shows that we have studied things and not in vain. Going a little deeper, what are the bodies that you were able to study, and in what nature did you have them with you? You went to visit there. Did they give you samples? What are you like and what bodies are they? Look, that is an interesting topic to explain because going back into the past, let's say since I was more or less 9 years old, I have been more or less, let's say, engrossed in studying human bone remains. At the age of 9, I found by chance very ancient human bone remains. And from that moment on, I did not want to stop investigating everything. So little by little, as I grew up, until I wanted to be a doctor, then I continued with all this. I tell you this because of the following. I always, when dedicating myself to researching bone remains, the fundamental thing is to have the bone rest in my hand, the bones in my hand, measure them, draw the corresponding formulas, draw the conclusions, but always you have to see them and measure them, feel them. But in this case, I was presented in front of bodies that were covered with diatom, the diatomaceous earth on the outside. When you see it, you do not find cranial sutures. You do not find unions. You do not find anything because it is covered by a little bit of that diatomaceous earth. And then it disguises all The joints added to the dissected skin stuck to the bone. So on the outside, there was no point in having them inside, touching them and measuring them, and measuring, for example, cranial diameters and bone heights, etc. Because they weren't going to be exact for the same reason that they had the diatomy layer plus the dissected skin, right? So it was very good for me to be able to obtain X-rays and tomography scans, but especially direct X-rays, which we call direct X-rays in medicine, because it allowed me to enter the cranial cavities or inside the body and there to be able to take, although not measurements. Be able to take angles. Notice that when I wipe, because of the internet, the X-ray, I couldn't know what size the real X-ray was because the internet, the screen where I received it on the computer varies. If I have a large monitor, I see the X-ray as large. If I have a small one, I see it as small. So that X-ray, I couldn't know what the real size of the original X-ray was. Therefore, you couldn't measure it in centimeters, much less apply the formulas to get the indexes right. So what did it make easier for me? It made it easier for me to apply angles, surfaces, relative diameter. Polygons, well, since an angle in a small X-ray is the same angle opening as in a large X-ray, then it was more accurate to measure the mummies that way, right? So I dedicated myself to studying the endocranium, that is the interior part of her skull. For example, within the specialty that I founded later, let's say that I super specialized in craniometry, for example. I do everything that is the study of bones, but I have, let's say, a special predilection for the study of the skull, which for me is the basis of all the memories of the person in life that are recorded there, right? Well, then I dedicate myself in that case, as I tell you, to measuring angles, to measuring surfaces, to measuring polygons. And as I began to measure polygon surfaces, I began to get goosebumps. Because I saw things that I never imagined could demonstrate to me the angular mathematical results that I measured. One thing, yes. Can you be a little more specific about what made you feel that way? Yes, it was the following. Let's see, I'm going to give it to you with an example. If in a study of a profile skull of a Pithecus sauceos, that the Pithecus is the primitive monkey from which we derive from Africa, I chose two angles, which are the Merkel angle and the Eckel angle. Well, they are complicated. I am not going to describe them here because I would have to have the image of a skull, but those two are angles of the endocranium, right? That is from the internal part of the skull to the height. To give you an idea, more or less at the height of the base of the skull, the antero-inferior part, which would be where the pituitary gland is located. Well, then, in another book 2 years ago, without knowing about these mummies, I had already said that when those angles were modified, we were going to enter the involution of our species and extinction. Why do I say this? Because, well, I don't want to mix it up so much, but it's all together. But look, going back to what you asked me, if in a profile of a skull, of an X-ray of a Pithecus, those angles are of obtuse aperture, that is, both of them have more than 90 degrees of aperture. And then I apply those angles in the Homo sapiens or in the Neanderthal loin or in the habilis loin, whatever. And I see that they do not change in almost any of the differentiation with the Pithecus, and they are simply a little more pulling at the right angle of 90 degrees, but very little. So what do I think? I think that between our ancestor Pithecus and the human species, there is little difference because we derive from it, and because the base of the skull is proven to have never or almost never been modified. And it is the only part of the skull that does not change from ape to man. Well, that's it for the first part. So seeing that it changed from a few degrees from obtuse to a little more at a right angle. And then I measured these short 60 centimeters mummies, which I have already given a scientific name to be able to identify it. I'm going to tell you. And when I measure them, I see that the angle is that those two angles continue to close and get closer to the right angle. So I see a mathematical continuity between the angle of the monkey, the angle of the man, and the angle of the mummies. So that's why when I go to the Chamber of Deputies, I end up saying that they are our descendants of the future, and that they don't have to be with us, they have to be in the future. They realize so when maybe if I tell it like this all at once to all this to a person who is not involved in the subject, the first thing I'm going to say is what he is saying. Hello, how do I interpret? Well, but I said it, and that is why I clarified it at that moment in the Chamber of Deputies, that I was not saying what I wanted or what I liked or what I wanted to do as a sensationalist or any interest. I said what the numbers told me. If you tell me 2 plus 2 is 4, and if you tell me the right angle is 90 and not 60, then the result is this. Suddenly people forget that the mathematics of geometry is still like what measures everything. Of course, they are a law that does not vary. Notice how things are in medicine. When you want to give us Zweitausender, a percentage of a sign, for example, on a bone, you say it has a 70-80% of being, for example, man, woman, whatever, but you never say 100% because 100% in medicine, it does not exist. Because 100% means perfection, that is, it means God. And the man never reached that perfection. In this case, in mathematics, it is much closer than in medicine because 2 plus 2 is 4. Let's say I'm saying 100%, but only in the math. Well, but through her, then I was able to say that I like to give peace of mind because in these things, the doctor does not have to be aggressive towards people who do not think the same or who are afraid to think in another way or who have a structure that does not allow him to live the life he is leading. So the doctor has to be responsible and prudent, not to force these things so that no one feels bad. But I had to clarify that it was not something that I like to say and that many times I did not do it. Look, I repeated the indexes a lot of times because I didn't believe them myself. So before going to Mexico, I did them a lot. When I returned from Mexico, I did them again. And they continued to give me the same indexes. So I said, well, I'm calm that I said what I had to say. Besides, I'm very struck by what many people claim because they say it's irresponsible to talk about those things. And it's like, why don't you ask the person who investigated this? What credentials do they have to investigate it and to say what they say? Say, instead of making accusations, that seems out of place to me. Look, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to speak very sincerely about the type of people on earth who walk among people that one should not expect everyone to be like one. Not everyone has the same training. Not everyone has the same interest, the same culture, the same science. We are all different, and that is what God made us. That is, God gave us all an individuality, and we must respect it. But on the other hand, I have to clarify, I have spent my entire life studying medicine, and I did not study one specialty, then another. No, I have always dedicated myself to this. I have done this all my life, and I will continue. Doing it until let me die. Then there comes a time in one's life where one has already lived many years and has few left to live. Because if I am 76 years old now, how long can I live? Up to 100, more than 100, I don't think it will be very easy to live, right? Well, but I have much fewer years left to live than I've already lived, so I don't like to waste time. Therefore, I, the person who does not have the specialization that I have, look at what I am going to tell you within medicine. Even if I am a doctor and the other is not, well, let him be a doctor of another specialty. Let him be a gynecologist, traumatologist, clinician, surgeon, but he does not have the specialty of anthropology and physics, medical. I respect him, but I don't talk to him. Why on this topic? Well, because I spend my life studying bone and measuring bones up to ye. That I would fall asleep in my bed, in my bedroom, and my hand would fall to the floor holding a bone that I had to hit, and I would stay asleep. And I was sleeping squeezing two bones that I had put glue on to make them stick so I could measure them the next day. Well then, if I spend my life like this, even if he comes, pay attention to what I tell you. Even if another doctor comes, I'm not going to argue. I'm simply going to say, don't waste my time. If you have a thesis that collaborates with science in validating mine, I will thank you. And if you show me that it is superior to mine or that mine is invalid, I will be the first to recognize it, but show it to me that way. Do not fight. Let me tell you, spend 40 years like I did, plus measuring bone, and then we'll talk. And that's why if you haven't been there for 40 years, then take care of yourself. Because if I ask you a question and you don't answer, then you're going to have to leave and keep your mouth shut. You understand? Well, then I don't argue. I don't argue with those people, much less if the person is not a doctor or is from another profession. I don't even listen to them anymore. Because it is the same as if I want to correct their profession. It is impossible because I am not from that profession. So then the main thing I have always had a defect of mine, and that is that I have always been curious and I have always wanted to know my origin. My origin is the origin of men. And I went around and around and couldn't find it. Well, when I found one of these mummy from Nazca, things changed. I already started to see things very differently. And do you know what it's like to change at my age, the way I think about the classical medicine that I studied and about the things I see now? So, well, getting back to the topic, I don't argue with anyone, but don't make me a bastard. Because if you make me a bastard, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you. Know what? Let's have a duel. It's not going to be with swords or guns. It's going to be a duel. Let's see. Come on, look for justice. Look for the university. Bring in professors. Let's have a public debate. But you have to know medical, physical anthropology like the one I studied. If not, don't get involved. If not, don't get involved. So I say that as a joke because I'm never going to do it. That's not my intention. Do you understand me? My intention is to learn. And if I learn and can transmit it to others and collaborate, what more do I want? In the case of the mummies, for example, I work ad honorem and I am willing to work permanently like this because I cannot work, for example, for a fee or anything, for a find that is the most important find in the life of the man who heritage not only of the earth, but of our entire solar system. Well, then in the face of that, I have to be humble and say, no, I can't even benefit from anything except learn more. You understand me? So I offer myself just as Mr. Mawson has offered me, that I look for Mrs. Chirika and the professionals that I appreciate very much, that I met, to do everything possible on my part to modestly collaborate with a small grain of sand. Because the truth is that you have to be very realistic. It is such a fabulous discovery that we will never be able to fully cover it. This White House and dine aside with these issues, I believe that humanity in the last 2,000 years has been involved in a war, more than a physical war, a war to have control of knowledge. And this has always happened, right? But this type of knowledge, well, it is more powerful. It has more implications that can change everything, right? Well, I'm going to give you a brief little story of how I see things. For me, in the history of man, in the different species that have existed until now, man has made two mistakes, at least very important generational mistakes. One when it was the species of Homo habilis, and another when it is the species of Homo sapiens sapiens. And I tell you briefly, we all know that we descend from the African Piteco. When Homo habilis appears, which would be the first man after it originates between the monkey and the previous being, which is a theory of mine. Well, why was it told to habilis? Because one day, let's say we are going to make a story about him. He will have taken a stone and throws it at a partner of his. And as he hits the other with that stone, the other feels hurt, screams or gets hurt and leaves. When this individual who threw the stone sees what he causes by throwing the stone, well, with this I am a little stronger. I can now have my hierarchy because I can throw a stone at the other. And the other ran away. So that's why he was called habilis, because he was skillful in doing something good. But in that act of throwing the stone, which is an act supposed to explain many more complex things, the following happens when the individual throws the stone, then picks it up and says, this stone is important to me. Because it allows me to throw a useless stone at the other, and it allows me to win in a fight and harm the other. Then let's say he retains the stone for himself, and the first property instincts of the individual appear. That stone becomes something very valuable to him because it allowed him to survive by defending himself from others. Well, then that is when man makes the first mistake, because not only does he commit the phenomenon of appropriating something as property, but then he does not want to give it to others. And the instinct of selfishness and the instinct of violence appear. And that is where man begins to fail. And the second case where man makes mistakes that are much more serious is when he goes from the species called Homo sapiens to the species Homo sapiens sapiens, which was more or less ago. I put it in my thesis in the year 2001, more or less. I put 100,000 years before the present, more or less at that time. At that time, a phenomenon occurred in the world in the migrations of man, where man was just arriving in America, who previously had no individual in America. Then the passage through the Bering Strait to reach America through the ice bridges coincides more or less in time or in period of time with which man transforms from zapping to zapping. Zapping, this means use, and that man, when he was of the species Homo sapiens only, he was wise, but he did not realize it. He acted wisely, but he didn't realize it because he was within the animal kingdom along with other living beings. And then he integrated one of the three mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms and was part of the animal kingdom. And until then, the harmony was maintained. When it coincides with the arrival of man from the Bering Strait, the settlement of America, man becomes Homo sapiens sapiens. Because not only is he wise, but he realizes that he is wise, and that's where all the problems came in, because they start, let's say the first thing they do is separate themselves from the animal kingdom and look at the three kingdoms from the outside. Then imagine that man already looked at the three kingdoms as not part of him, but rather the part that he had to dominate. So that's where all the human predation comes from, and it continues and will continue until we are no longer species. So for me, in the general human evolution of the species, at least twice there are attempts at great human errors that then lead man to what he currently is, which is that he is digging his own grave. Our human species are going to become extinct, as all species have become extinct. But ours, which has lived so little, let's say that it is in a hurry to eliminate itself. He doesn't believe that all this that is happening right now, especially in the United States, and these meetings, these discoveries that are being made are related in some way to some type of change that may happen to us as a species. I see it from a medical point of view. That is, I try not to stray from what medicine is, because maybe I'm going to improvise and that's no longer correct, right? I have to shut my mouth. I have to speak as long as I can demonstrate things. If not, I have to remain silent out of respect for others and out of respect for medicine and the seriousness of people, right? Now, for me, the extinction of the current human species, the species of Homo sapiens sapiens, has already begun. Look, when I presented my thesis in 2001, the doctoral thesis in medicine and surgery at the National University of Cordoba, I spent 27 years preparing this phytosandyne thesis, and well, when I presented it on December 3rd, which was the Doctor's Day, well, here in Argentina, I proposed that the university accept the new species Homo sapiens sapiens dissimilis. That is different Homo sapiens sapiens. And I warned the medical school that this species is already walking among us. Well, so it is the species that is already replacing Homo sapiens sapiens. A question, yeah, what characteristics does this new definition of Homo sapiens or this new species have, according to your estimates? It has anatomical characteristics, it has functional, psychological, personality characteristics, a way of seeing the world, a way of self-preservation, different ways of, let's say, survival. It is a species that despises everything, a species that does not care about keeping a schedule, does not care about taking care of itself, does not care if because of the genetic globalization that it produces. And this genetic globalization is achieved thanks to the means of communication that we have in the world, where we can be. I can be in Tijuana with you now after traveling 12 hours and I'm already there, right? Well, and so on, everyone. So this globalization allows SOSAOs to exaggerate the genetic mix. And since there is a globalization that, let's say, offers an exaggerated variety in the world genetically or hereditarily, it makes it difficult. To explain as it may be. It causes the genetics of Homo sapiens sapiens to be lost and a totally unmeasurable individual appears. When I measure a Homo sapiens, I have medicine tables that tell me skull this way, it corresponds to this, bone such and such, corresponds here, and so on. When I measure a tall, long-lined person, which here we call pompid in America, they have to have a dolichocephalic head that is elongated large with a face that is elongated downwards. Homo sapiens sapidissimila can be tall and have the head of an andid that is much smaller. In other words, anarchy occurs where it does not belong. If you have a longilinear thorax in a tall person, well, and you have a longilinear thorax in a short person, yes, you have. Can this be called evolution or devolution? Oh no, what a good question, and I'm very glad you asked it. It is called evolution and it is called extinction, because we must keep one thing in mind. The human being is an individual who always carries in his life the concept of evolution towards extinction. Don't think that when we evolve, we have it to be happy, because one evolves and grows so that one day it disappears and another one comes after us. So we evolved on the one hand, but that evolution means that we are going to extinction. Does Susan realize this? All species, when they have evolved, have patterns, facts that bear my name about this. For example, at the beginning of a species, it resembles the individual of the previous species that there was physically, in the way of life, in everything. As you get closer to Alejandro, towards the middle of the time of the new species, it no longer looks like anyone. And when the end of the species is reached, it looks like the next one to come, right? So let's say that there is always this concept you don't have to get too happy, because it's the same as if I tell you I'm having a birthday, how nice. They make me a cake, they celebrate me, but I'm getting older and older, because when I turn 1 year old, I am happy, yes, because the cake is delicious, but I have 1 year less to live. Well, the same thing happened in humans. A question about that, because you see that there are many cases of abductions and people who claim to have mental faculties. The shamans of the old days also seem to have had abilities like this. Do you think they are part of Homo sapiens sapiens, or have you ever studied that phenomenon? No. I don't know anything about abductions, I'm honest. I mean, I haven't been able to get away from the medical side, and I wish I had at least had something to distract myself with something new, right? But not about abductions or what are called extraterrestrial ships, whatever you want to call them, or flying saucers, they tell you before, right? Yes, I don't know, just Zweitausender, and I think it must be very nice to see it and know something, but in that aspect, I have to be honest, I have not had the virtue of being able to develop in those things. With respect to shamans, the shaman is a word that comes originally from Siberia. It is a Siberian word, and it is the healer, who is often the chief, very special people, and who I estimate had the powers of a person who respects nature, but who at the same time is accompanied by a human group on which he acts, who also favors his success by believing in him. Because you can become a very shaman, but if the person you heal doesn't believe in you, I think you won't be as successful as if you were. Create the placebo effect. Not a placebo effect, but I would say that there is a conjunction of energies of the body and the person, both in the one who heals and in the one who is sick. And when those come together, I am one of those who believe that the body is energy and that it cannot be seen, but it is energy, let's say, and it is typical of the human being, because other living beings would not have it in that way, for me, way of seeing. So both things have to be present to believe in someone. And this book that I'm going to release now, The Guardian Theory, which talks about minimizing stress, has a lot to do with that. If one has the guardian or the shaman, it would be the same. Do you have the cover of the book somewhere on hand that you can show us, or not yet? No, because it's not out yet. It comes off the presses next week. Yeah, how good. I still don't have the cover, but look, I could tell you about that energy I'm telling you about. I just told you, let's see, I got tired of exhuming ancient skeletons, but you can't imagine. I already lost count a while ago. If you ask me how many I did in my life, I don't remember. I don't know. Hundreds of thousands. Yes, it was a crazy thing, but at first I started to write it down. Then I didn't write it down anymore because I said enough and that's it. Keep going. I care about that one. Thing like Messi, his goals, no. I know, but that's where it could be. So to top it all off, I wanted to do it because I always liked it. Then I verified some phenomena that did not. They can, let's say, they can be demonstrated, yes, but you have to be very attentive. I verified that the energy that a human being has after dying a little continues in the person, in the body, yes. And not so in animals and in certain human beings and not in all. And I'm going to explain to you. When a person dies and is buried, they are inhumane in the inhospitable area or thousands of years ago in those prehistoric cultures, right? Or cultural horizons of great antiquity. Well, they inhumane them in the middle of the mountains, inhospitable areas that are currently difficult to reach, right? If after they buried him, no one touched that grave and no one took him out again, and then I go and take him out. In other words, it would be a primary burial site when no one has touched it after. That has been buried. until I study it. Zweitosendine, something happened to me that I later began to think about things very seriously. You uncover the grave and feel one, kind of aroma of the earth, let's say, of the remains that have been left there decomposing with the earth itself. And it's like a kind of mist that comes up, and it would pass over my face like that, and it would give me tachycardia, and I would run backwards, and then he got up and told me I feel bad. And well, it's over. Now I continue. And then I didn't feel it anymore. But when I went to a tomb that had already been discovered before, I didn't find that. In other words, when you uncover it after death, the remains of energy contained in the earth go away, and then it never comes back. And with animals, I could never contract that. In other words, the animal there is a difference in the energy of man with that of animals. How could it be that I have never wanted to tell this thing that I tell, not even in my books or anything, because I said, well, it must be that I pay a lot of attention to this, that I am very attentive, but I don't know. Not much more. I don't want to talk so as not to complicate things, but I tell you, there came a time when I myself even took the fact that I felt that as a sign of a primary grave diagnosis. Signs, the reason Caleb has these anomalous experiences. Do things like this happen to you? Things have also happened to me that I have already told on my channel, and there is a division between people who have had these experiences and people who have not. And I think that this division is sometimes very noticeable in these types of topics because they are people who know, because they have experienced something. They know that something exists. They don't know how to explain it very well, but they try to make their own interpretations. That has happened to me. Apparently that happened to you too. But people who have not gone through that just listen to you talk and say nothing like that has happened to me. So no, I can relate to the same thing. Well, you have to respect people who say that nothing has happened to them because nothing has happened to them, and because you cannot expect everyone to feel the same. And therefore, first you have to be tolerant of that because they don't say it. By the way, but they are also sincere. Now, the human body. The human body, no, of all living beings, but more so the human, is like a solenoid. What a solenoid is: an electric magnet. We are loaded with energy. We have spiritual energy. We have biological energy, hormonal energy, let's say mechanical energy from the muscles, metabolic energy from food. We are spiritual beings. We are rational beings. We are very large complexes. So I don't see anything strange. And for me, it is natural that something of that is always kept on Earth. I don't have to be scared because I'm dealing with human beings. I have tried digging up animals and you don't feel that way, and I don't intend for anyone to feel that way. Maybe if someone goes with me and I'm always alone doing my job, maybe I can show him at some point that maybe he can feel it, because if I feel it, because no one else will be able to feel it. I don't see that they are supernatural things. No, it's the energy of life that left and leaves its traces. Do you understand me? Yeah, and the Man of Jesus trail. Yes, but that is that very concept that you are telling me. Are there people with a slightly more square mentality because they haven't had experiences like that and they say, no, they don't believe it, you know? That's why I make my comment, but well, I wanted to tell you if we can, because a while ago you told something about the theories and hypotheses that have been made with these 60 centimeters bodies. And a hypothesis that the biologist Jose La Cruz Rios took up on the part of the skeptics to criticize these mummies, saying that they are not real and there is a lot of confusion among people. Frankly, I tell you why this interview. It will be seen with people who speak English because we are also going to translate it with artificial intelligence. So there are many people in the English-speaking community who are not very clear about what is happening with these bodies, and that is why I wanted to talk to you. What do you think of that hypothesis? Why do you think it is invalid, and what makes 60 centimeters bodies real with respect to this hypothesis? How can you answer? Well, I had to examine when I went to Mexico a large hand that I had in my hands. Let's say I had to examine a 60 centimeter skull, one entire body of 60 centimeters. Nothing else. In person, yes, in the hospital, the hand is 40 centimeters. Why? And yes, it was double mine. One thing really, look, as Martina Chirica said, my eyes watered because I suddenly began to see the magnitude of life at that moment, something that one is used to seeing as a doctor in other things. And if many times you are impressed by how a person dies next to you, you say, what happened to me cannot save them? Or am I walking through a salt flat and find a 10,000-year-old individual in a fetal position and I move there because one of them gets hit, right? About it, let's say everything one leaves vibrating. Imagine when I see another human species that had it in my hands. So I already rule it out. I almost don't want to talk. They have been real. They are biological. They have lived. And for me, I said something that was totally different. They are going to live, I said. And I can't explain why they are there 1,700 years ago or 1,000 years ago. For me, they are our descendants. Well, when I say it, I don't say it because I want to be seen in England or the United States. I say this because mathematics tells me that. So people who don't believe and, well, they don't know what they're missing. I would like everyone to believe, but life is like that. We are not all the same. There is positive, negative, and good. So it is not what one believes. Are they going to realize one day, and that day they are going to say, what are those that we didn't realize before? The time we have lost, we will never get back. What features did you notice about the big hand that caught your attention the most, that made you want to be the most cool? He had a metal plate on the back of his hand, round, golden in short, with a series of embossings there, which are those implants that all these mummies have. And, well, Yusan. Well, and I think it corresponds to an individual taller than me. I didn't ask that because there wasn't much time. I remember that Martina Chirica recorded everything I said at that time. And, well, they are things that one no longer forgets. And not only do they not forget them, but I returned to my Argentina here and I start to say, well, and I studied. But I thought I had studied a lot of things. I didn't study anything because I need to learn a lot more things. And I don't know if I have time. And I hope I don't believe much in those things, but I hope I live again to continue studying because I'm running out of time. So the interest that I have is simply that knowledge. And they turn me around, pretend that you were turning over all of the papers from the years in which I created an annual 45 pencil course for students and doctors who wanted to receive this use. And suddenly it was in the index and I mixed everything up because things were not, but were other. So, well, I would have liked to have this book that I am going to release now in the book. I talk about measurements that I made to Maria and Montserrat, but I did not have them leave. I would have liked it. It would have been a lot to have them there to measure them, but I did them through x-rays that they sent me and live. You say it was the hand? The hand, a skull, one whole body of 60 centimeters. Does the body not know whose it was? From which of the mummies? He told me, but I don't remember it now. Lord, do you burn me? Yes, yes. Okay. And I wanted to ask you, well, tell me, before I ask you what's next. Well, then I have given it names, for example, but not whimsical names, but names that are in accordance with what I have been studying for a long time. because it happened to me that many things that I had studied were theoretical, and I was missing an example like these mummies to do the practical part, and this is exactly what I fell for. So I have called Maria and Montserrat the species Homo des Homo, which would be, according to what I proposed in other books several years ago, they would be those who come after Homo sapiens, sapiens dissimilis, which would be the new species Homo des Homo, which is the species that makes man dehumanize. That is, he stops being a man, and it would be the last species of ours before the human species becomes extinct. Those would be Maria and Montserrat, and the short ones, these 60 centimeters, I call them ostentoi prudens. What does it mean in Latin, the one who shows himself or the one who appears prudent? Because for me, it is a species. That she is no longer human and that she has always taken care and will take care not to openly show herself to humans. He is terrified of showing himself to humans. What is Homo des Homo? The biggest mummies. The Montserrat, and then Maria and Montserrat, maybe Sebastian would be too, and the other smaller one too. Well, which are mixtures of humans on another hand. And there I want to clarify one thing. Look, I do not agree. And I say this clearly because I am not going to change it unless someone shows me that I am wrong with another scientific method. Okay? And it's not my survival. It's just that those are the conclusions I draw. Look, there is a lot of talk, even among my colleagues, who I appreciate very much. It is said that Marie and Montserrat would have a genetic mix according to the DNA that they have made, that it would be from an unknown being, from chimpanzees, bonobo and another monkey, no, I know, and of human. And so they say at that time, 1,000 years ago in Peru, in Nazca, they did, let's say, high-tech microsurgery or genetic implants. I say no, I don't agree with that because let's go back to when the Pithecus, which was the last of the known Pithecus, was called Australopithecus robustus, a descendant of the African Australopithecus, and in turn a descendant of Australopithecus afarensis, the famous Lucy of Ethiopia. Well, then the robust one, who was the descendant of all of these, according to my theory, joins with a being that I call a previous being. And he meets with him more or less the date, I don't remember exactly, but I have been able to determine the date more or less almost exactly, which is the known date that this Pitheco, world-renowned for carbon-14, lived and all that. So what's up? That previous being gets together with some of these Pithecos, as I say in my books, and that Pitheco begins to give birth to children, who are some monkeys and other men. Then a Zweitausendine dichotomy occurs, and some of them continue to produce monkeys, others do not, others continue to produce monkeys and men. And thus two different chains are produced that reach the present. And in the present, those monkeys are the chimpanzee, the gorilla, the orangutan that we know, and they are men. Us, well then, since he was a man, man has always had within his genes a number of dormant chromosomes and genes that are of monkey origin, and that in the monkey they are awake, and in the human being they are inactive so that it can be man, and in the monkey they are active for and asleep for. Humans, and the monkey also has them so that he is not a man but rather a monkey. Isn't that right? So it goes without saying for me that at the time, 1,000 years ago in Nazca, they performed this high-tech genetic microsurgery because man already has sleeping monkey genes. Okay, so those would be the ones they believe have been implanted, right? The man from before already has them. The others that are unknown would be those of the previous being, which is the being that gives the human part to the monkey so that it inherits men. And the other part that remains is the part of us, of the man, of the current man, of the man. And this previous being believes that these are these mummies, these bodies. No, not me. The mummies are consequences of the previous being. Okay, that is the previous being became their father, the father of many species. Look, I think it's long, but I'll tell you, I'm in my element now. I don't know if you realize it, right? I mean, I can talk until tomorrow. I won't get tired of telling you. In this book on the theory of the guardian, I explain well there in the previous one that I'm going to send both of them to Mexico. Her name is the woman from Rodeto, who is another woman that I discovered, well, very, very similar to take as a standard. Her bones that I used to measure, the mummies. Right, it was one of the women from the bones that I presented in my thesis so many years ago that I didn't even imagine that there would be these mummies, right? So let's say that this previous being is an individual, a person, I don't know why that I already name him, with certain characteristics in the bones and certain types of typology that I can more or less identify. Let's say he comes and I say that he could not reproduce with his own. We are going to tell a short story to understand this, which is a very complex thing. And perhaps before talking about it, one has to begin to adapt to the topic because it is not easy to talk about these things. Then this previous being found beings on earth similar to him, but who were like monkeys. So maybe to continue a descendant from him, which otherwise would have been impossible. It is genetically crossed with these monkeys. So today's man has at the distal end of the humerus, he has a fossa called the olecranon fossa, which is a fossa where when he stretches his arm, the olecranon of the forearm fits there. Well, that Zweitausendein fossa, which is a cavity, the previous being had it unperforated and the monkey had it perforated. So currently we see that 80% of women in the world are pierced, and it is a sign of female sexual dimorphism with respect to the lack of piercing that is typical of most men, which is a sign of male sexual dimorphism. Well, that was one of the topics of my thesis in 2001 when I didn't even imagine these mummies. And now I use it as a template to be able to define and say the previous being did not have the perforation in the elbow, and the monkey and the piticusi and the gorilla still have it. When the gorilla walks, it cannot do so on two legs like human bipedalism, but rather it takes two steps and falls due to the lack of curvature of the spine, the type of skull that weighs it down. Then when the weight falls, he stretches his arms and fits into the olecranian perforation, fits the elbow, the skull gold, and reinforces the elbow joint to resist the weight of the body and continue walking on all fours. Man and woman inherit it, but they no longer use it. And it is an inheritance that is the memory of genes, but they are no longer used. The same as a black person who was black because he lived in Africa with the intense sun. But if he is born in Alaska, in Canada, he will continue to have black skin even if the sun does not exist. You understand me? They are genetic memories that remain, that are no longer used. Well, then that's where it all comes from, right? So that previous being, in the end, so much turning and turning, I began to now be able to say about each human species and say about the previous being the more or less characteristics that they had of some things. The previous being may possibly have been a tridactyl. What makes you say that? Let's see, when the earth spins, it is on its axis. It does so like a top. Have you seen the tricks of the kids who tie a rope to you and you throw it to the ground? It starts to spin. When it spins at high speed, the top stays vertical, but when it loses speed, it wants to head sideways like that, right? The Earth, with the speed that allows us to live, cannot move very fast when traveling to the sun, but by rotating on its axis, it then rotates at a speed and pitches sideways. Then between the axis of the Earth and that variation that the Earth makes on the sides, an angle of 23 and 0, U's and 4 or 5 is produced, which is the Euler angle. And it causes, let's say, the known Earth to cause this movement of the Earth's axis to mark an orbit, which is a large orbit, which in turn has an undulation with waves that are active and that depress. You become active, it becomes depressed, and thus it turns on itself. Well, and that complete rotation of an orbit of 25,000 or so years has been measured. Well, and if you transport it to the past, you see that it coincides with the creation of the coming of each human species. So since the year 2024 now, I have been able to calculate why, let's say until the time of Homo habilis falls, just when Homo habilis falls, just the dates that are known worldwide in Homo habilis, Homo sapiens, and I have calculated that there have been those cycles that are called cycles of precession of the Earth. It is called that. There have been 100 cycles of precession of the Earth until the robust Australopithecus lived, which was, let's say, the one that gave birth to men and monkeys. So the Nazca Mummies would be in the 101st precession of the Earth. That is, they began 1,700 years ago, and the circle of the Earth, where the Nazca 2009 mummy appears, still needs to be completed until reaching 25,000 years. In other words, the Nazca memes would be included within precession 101, and it's almost fair, and I couldn't believe I'm not wrong. Well, I started adding and it gave me that. So that means that at some point in that perception cycle, when the waves of that Zweitausendein orbit descend or are activated in a certain activation and it accelerates, and then you want to stop the spin, right? What is the Earth? Well, at that moment it happens, as I would say, that time changes its, let's say it's way of presenting yourself or your length of time. Let's see if I can explain myself like this, telling you, if the Earth rotates at a time on a taut fabric, a surface of a taut mantle, a fabric rotates, and when it makes that falling movement, it depresses on the fabric and enters, making a small hole in the Earth, in the fabric. There are two types of times, one that is shorter, straight, and another that goes down and is longer. So when this phenomenon occurs, two human species that were separated for a long time, when, let's say, that plane of the fabric where we assume the Earth is rotating, deforms, causes the fabric to shorten and move closer together. Two other species that have never lived together. So here comes the mystery that I always wanted to know, and that I heard in the classics, which said the following: a phenomenon occurred that was almost inexplicable when the Australopithecines lived. Then they had to die so that Homo habilis was born. Then they had to die so that the Erectback was born, and so on. In other words, for my grandson to live, my father and grandfather have to die first. But nevertheless, at some point during that time, we were all together and lived. together Australopithecus with archaic precocious Homo sapiens, that is called, and we lived together as Homo habilis, as Homo erectus, and they fought among themselves, and they ate one and killed another. And from the other, he took away the fire from the other, who wanted like this and like that, 2010. So, but those were momentary zones, and no one realized that. Then suddenly those cycles of precession happened. And let's say that that canvas that I had on, which it rotates, pulls, dissipated again, stretched, and the times were separated again. Well, there is a movie that I always recommend called War of Fire. I saw it a long time ago. There are two versions, new and old, which is made by anthropologists of the time, and which shows that, for example, a sequence. It is a movie where no one speaks. There are only gestures in the people because they are all primitive, where an Australopithecus comes out sleeping and the Homo avil came and wanted to eat him when he was sleeping. And the Homo comes erecta and saves him because he fights the other and saves and so on. Then for a moment, all the primitive species live together. Well, then that's the way I've managed to see, let's say, that kind of things. I have tried to see it, let's say, in my own way. That's what sums up the Guardian theory a bit, the one I'm going to talk about now, isn't it true? As for the Tridactylia, yes, the Tridactylia doesn't keep me up much sleep because, let's see, the Australopithecines of that time were 3.5 million years old. 3 million or 2.5, up to 2 million. Agata, the south of the Piteco robusto. Well, when the monkey comes down from the tree, let's call it that, at that time the prosimian comes down from the tree. Why does he do it? Because he manages to walk on two legs. Walking on two legs frees your hands and you can use them on anything while walking. Then he comes down from the tree, walks on the ground and begins to collect fruit and eat. So as you are fed more food variation, your brain develops more. When Australopithecus afarensis, which was the famous Lucy, was very vegetarian, but she had feet almost like us and her hands too. Then come the others, where in other words, there is a phenomenon that although her descendants began to eat more meat and the brain grew much more until they became a man, but many times the big toe was not parallel. To the others, but was situated as in the monkeys, separate. And many times it was folded like this. One says, but how does he walk? Upright like man no longer returns to the tree and eats varied foods of meat and vegetables so that the brain develops very well, but his foot and hands tend to return to their shape to be able to grasp the branch of the tree. I already understood it. One question is, how much time do you think is in the future from this to this? Have you already taken measures or something like that? 3 million years, 4. That's where I say something that I say in the book, that either the extinction of man comes in 30 more years or it comes in 3. $4 million years, because if the evolution of the Pitico so far is 3.5 million years, and notice that we reach our species, that we are destroying everything in the world of the previous human species was much better than the one we have. I don't think that because they made fire with a little stone, scraping it all day to make a little flame at night because it was difficult, and now we go and light it. A call with a lighter or we talk on a cell phone, do not think that we are ahead of ourselves. Because we can have these advances, but at the cost of destroying our entire habitat, then our extinction accelerates much more. I calculate, I don't know, well, I hope I'm wrong, but I hope we never become extinct. But it would be crazy to think that if Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, Homo sapiens became extinct, we are not going to become extinct. I believe that is a fact. We are all born and die, so that is our law. Well, yes, indeed. Hey, a question about DNA. Do you have the ability to interpret DNA studies and results well, or is it not within your specialty? No, it's not much. And I tell you, I have used DNA very little due to some factors, let's say typical of Argentina, that it costs a lot here to make DNA and you have to have great economic power because they are expensive. And many times with respect to man, for us, many times this cytosine DNA is a help, but many times not, because we either have, for example, in an exhumation, we have a DNA that may be similar to another person in the family of the one I am exhuming, or things like that. But regarding the mummies, for example, with what I told you before, that I did not agree with what they say that DNA from the bonobos and unknown chimpanzees has unknown. No, for me, that is not the case. So I respect people who make DNA. In fact, DNA is something fabulous, but for me, it is simply like doing a clinical analysis alongside the clinical inspection that I can do on the patient. I check a person and complement them with clinical studies, analysis, radiography. Well, DNA would more or less be like that for me. It does not always reflect, although it reflects many things, and it is something extremely, let's say, sophisticated and very evolved to do so, which is constantly revised in the DNA, right? But let's say that I see it this way, that way, right? It is something more, but it often does not coincide with what one achieves. By measuring a bone, it is often contradictory or often not. It's very advanced in quantum genetics for you. It just works naturally. That's what happened. I don't think that's what I said. I have a bibliography on that. I have always said it in my classes. We already know what the genes that are shared with the monkey are and are numbered. For example, the monkey lacks the inflammation gene, and man has it, and it is not that it is missing. It is asleep in the monkey, and in man it is awake. Or the speech gene, it is a very famous gene that is widely studied in schizophrenia or autism. In man, well, in the monkey, he is asleep, and the monkey does not speak, not because he does not have a developed larynx, but because he lacks that gene or because he does not lack it. If he is asleep, then you share many genes with him. And notice one thing, let's say that it causes you and a series of genetic imbalances and anarchisms. When hybridization or mixing occurs, let's say, what is it called? Globalized. They are two extremes of human mixtures, let's call it that. When the Neanderthals saw themselves surrounded by ice in Europe, 3,000-4,000 thick ice, and they couldn't get out of their caves, especially in the Pyrenees, in the northern part of Spain, where the Basques are. Wasn't that true? What is called hybridization occurs because the group remained isolated from themselves and they reproduced among themselves. And there is an endogamy that is called. So that is not something good for the human being, because let's say that it does not renew the blood. Let's call it that genetics of the human being. But that is a bad extreme. The other extreme would be to go to the opposite, which would be genetic globalization throughout the world of excess mixtures. These excess mixtures are also contradictory for human evolution because they also lead to the extinction of man because man handles too many components. Repeated genetics, then the species are no longer, as one says. For example, an example that I can give you of this is the Amerindians. The Amerindian is the man who populates America, isn't it? From north to south. The first Amerindians had their forearm longer than their arm, and they were tall, with an elongated head, a thin, elongated face, and high eye sockets. You said, well, at this height, they were pampered guys. That the Pampas is an agile man for the Pampas, isn't it true? And he inherits that not from the Europeans or the Asians where he came from, but he inherits it from the genetics of Africa. This is how the name Africa came about. And as it leaves Africa, it passes through the different continents, and some stay and form towns. As they formed towns, they decreased in height, stopped being nomadic, and their forearms became shorter. And do you know why they had long forearms? Because the first Petecos balanced themselves with their long forearm like a tightrope walker on a rope so as not to fall and sway when they walked in their first bipedal position, like a monkey lowered to the ground. So, if the human being leaves Africa and does not stop at the continents and ends up in America, he brings all the American genetics, which is the same as the African genetics. Those who stayed on the other continents lost it because new peoples were formed. A lot of people were killed with the ice ages, North America too, so it loses half of the genetics, 50% of the African genetics. But those who continue walking to South America, and in this I speak of South America, Nazca, Peru, Chile, and Argentina, which for me have special importance, bring all the genetics of the African man. So this, let's say everything is one, then when Homo sapiens sapidissimilis, which is this one who doesn't care about anything about what he had, about his heritage, let's say, from traditional men, begins to manage all this genetic globalization of crossing, travel fast, another part of the world is doing well, and all of this causes excessive supply of genetics that in the end is harmful and also leads to the extinction of the human species. So there has to be a balance in this. That is, it's okay to mix, but not too much. That's what you're referring to. Not inbreeding, not hybridization, nor is the other generation, the water and 2000 and 21 and I believe that governs life a little bit of not being extremist in the life of the human being as well. I believe that this concept is present in all human aspects, right? Yes, the balance, of course. So, well, that is what is causing the forced extinction of now. When I talk about all these things, I don't say it because they listen to me. What's more, if they don't want to listen to me, I don't care. There comes a time in my life when I am satisfied with what I learned. I'm going to remind you of a phrase that I put in my book almost at the end. And there is a premise also there in my book that one didn't know whether to tell it to you or let you read. In the book of Yusand, well, no one knows that, but I put it like this so that you can understand how I see things later. Having studied these mummies, that's it. I don't need to say that they are biological, and I have already passed that stage. I said this way when I am finishing the book. One day I open the windows of my house and I start to look outside my house at the street, and I see the street, the people passing. By how people live. In other words, I integrate myself by looking out the window of my house at the world where I live. Suddenly they put a piece of paper on me, in the window glass, opaque, and I can't see anything anymore. But if I take a small nail, a needle, something, a small hole in that paper, I can't see anything either. But I get light from there, and that light that enters me moves, it varies, and I continue as if there is something on the other side. Well, that's how I've seen the future. So that's how I studied these things. That's why I couldn't sleep at night. So in that way, I have achieved. See, and what more can I ask for in my life? And as a doctor, much more. What more can I ask for? I have seen through that little hole that I don't see anything, but I see that something moves light, and what happens? What do I know? Well, I'm seeing the future. I'm never going to reach that future, I say, but I saw something from the future. I saw a little light that moved, and I know it's there on the other side. Well, that's the way I do. I finish by summarizing my experience with which I learned a new medicine again because of the Nazca Mummies. Therefore, they call me logical, right? I don't even listen to it anymore. What do you say to me? I don't care. Let's not talk about it. Let's talk about things beyond. And that is why I hope that what I think is given a little. I don't want to stay in description alone. Of the mummies, because I often see many colleagues with very good intentions. And a lot of technique, a lot of science are limited to just describing it. Yes, I've seen this, but let's look at a little more. Let's see what it's for. Make him move his bone, how he walked, why, all those things. They realize, well, now I'm going to tell you another thing, which is the scoop. And I'm going to tell him and he's not going to understand me. I don't know. Okay. These 60 centimeters short guys in life are much chubbier, right? She has those thin legs and those are the bones. They are much plumper, much more like they have a body. Well, okay. And it has the characteristic of having a speed from the waist up. Above all, at least as far as I can see, I don't know if skin tridactyly is limited. I don't know. I don't know that. But they are terrified of being seen. How do you know that? Well, that was the scoop. In Argentina in the 90s, a live one was seen. Where is their documentation for this? I want to know. I have no documentation because what happened, if I had known these things I documented, I will know how. But at that moment, the only thing you think about is a little to realize how the human psyche works. And about what I'm going to tell you, I don't care what others think because I am sure of what I say. And I'm not saying it so that you have a higher ranking on your program or so that they can see me or talk to me. Oh, look, in England, in North America, that's worth nothing to me. Simply what I can learn from those things is what interests me. I'm very selfish about that, but I keep that and I have plenty of it. When he looks at you, he has those big eyes. They are big eyes. And he has that forehead that is small. From the front, it is the same shape as the X-ray that you see from the front of the mummy. Small face, the mouth can hardly be seen. The teeth, the nose, almost none of them could even be seen. But a forehead like that, well, strange things, they are fierce, they have ugly faces. But when he sees you, no, but when you just happen to meet him and he looks at you, they panic, their eyes open like that, they become desperate, an extra impression, and he shoots, he disappears. Well, that is a case that when it appeared, I don't even remember the date because the first thing one does is not go to see it. He was seen through a window in a patio of a house. You don't do what you would do. What I can say is open the door, run out and try to grab it, see what's there. The first thing one says, I'm seeing visions, I can't see this. One gets blocked because we are living in the era of the men that we are, that we believe that we are the only one, the best, the king of creation, and that we do not give room to any other species or anything. So when you see those things, you don't go out to chase it, take photos of it, grab whatever. The first thing is that, no, I feel I prefer to forget it because they are going to tell me that I am crazy. They are going to say that I feel bad, that no, it can't be. Want it? He puts it into his subconscious and tries to forget it. Later over the years, she says, the hell, but what if, and now I'm seeing her again. So when I was in court, I had in my hands a file of a being like that they described, that everything was on television, and that in those deprived neighborhoods, he appeared to them, and there were people who even shot at them with weapons and did nothing to them. They made an RO theater for him. Well, they sent an investigation, a lawyer to investigate for the prosecution, and they came to no conclusion. That other case that I did not want to name because I had the file in my hand, but I did not give it importance either, and it remained that there was no conclusion of anything. And there is another case that I found out about another being that is also seen on the road, but I can't talk to the person who saw it, so I'm leaving them aside. But there is one thing to see, I assure you. I am not saying 100% because let's go back. One does not have to talk about a 100%, but what I say is what I know. Well, let's say that I didn't know whether to put that in the book because one comes into conflict with oneself and says, let's see, as a doctor, I can't make one feel bad reading this, another one who likes it, another one who is afraid, another who has stress, one said. And well, I kept quiet about it my whole life, and I'm only now saying these things, not even with my family. So because at that moment, what you think is that you are failing, is that you are seeing visions, you are seeing, what do I know, a hallucination. And that's because we are so engrossed in our lives that we don't realize the things we have. Many times we have things close to us that we do not give importance to. But if you saw the panicked face they make when you detect them, they open their big, enormous eyes, their forehead shrinks. Why? And where did you see the case? It was documents that he saw. What did you see? Why of that case? Well, what was seen at that time, that he appeared in the yard of a house. But what they said comes with documents. How did they document it? They didn't tell that. Okay, it is testimony then. And testimony, and it's as if I had told it because I was there nearby. And let's say that I am a witness of what they told me and the things that happen. It happens that I didn't want to say it. Perhaps if there had not been an opportunity for these low beings to meet, I would never have said it. It appears next to a railing, a staircase that was 120, 140, and this was halfway. That is 60 or 70 centimeters from having had. And well, there is a part where I have not wanted to talk more, and perhaps it is not the reliable story as I say it. Maybe I would have to say that maybe I could almost have seen it myself, but I don't want to get into more use and into more situations because I don't want to find out that there are people who feel bad. I want to respect those who believe and those who do not believe. I have never believed these things. The human mind gets blocked, doesn't it? Faced with this, he does not think that he is seeing a being, but rather thinks that things are wrong. They are very experiences, very traumatic. Yes, at that moment they are traumatic. You feel that you are sick, you feel and say, no, well, suddenly something has happened to me. If they had not appeared, this mummy would have remained anonymous, and I had almost forgotten. Lately, I recently said no, but stop. I know such a thing, Svitosendine. And then I went back and started analyzing a little more and all that stuff. So, well, it's not a scientific method, but there is no witch, but there are. A saying like that, isn't it true? It is not a scientific medical method. What's more, I can't say it, and I have to respect him for believing it, not believing it, because it turns me into speaking badly of what I said. That doesn't matter. I'm already out of those things. What I want, first of all, is to learn a little more. I mean, until the last day. After having seen this mummy, until the last day of my life, I will be searching to see what I can find. Oh, doctor, if you saw when you do Sweitausendein endocraniometry, you find all the craniometric points to apply old methods to measure the skull inside and things like that. Last question, doctor, because we've already spent almost an hour and a half before you can go rest. Thank you very much for sharing all this with us. I really wanted to ask you because this is a question that comes from a colleague named Gonzalo Chavez. He says that he has heard the concepts of Ukupacha, Hanakpacha, and Kaipacha, which are from the Andean culture, which speaks of three worlds that live together, which are the underworld, the earthly world, and another world that is above. But on Monday, I had an interview with David Velasco, who is studying all these writings and cave paintings and oral traditions of these cultures, and we talked about that. I don't know what, if you have something that deserves your opinion. No, let's say that I escape a little from my specific specialty. Yes, I have heard about the underworld, including the lakes of Mercury that were in the underworld, all the things that are spoken of, the rivers of Mercury, but I have not investigated them. I take that as, how can I tell you, like a landscape in which I measure a skeleton, for example. I do not interfere in that because that is better from a cultural or even philosophical or historical anthropology. Mine is purely medical. It is another specialty within medicine. So in that, I must be very interesting to dedicate myself to that, but a lot that even if I want a lot of time, I don't have any time left. No, because I assure you that in order to be able to interpret the human structure a little, it takes a lifetime. And I assure you that the day I have to leave this world, they will be on my mind, but I would say 80% of the things. I don't think I know medicine. I know very little because one life is not enough to study medicine. Imagine if we were also going to study other human species. Yes, it's terrible. Something that one has to resign to. Do I complain to my family and say how I couldn't see the Nazca mummy when I was younger? Well, although if I saw them in one of those when I was younger, I wouldn't be able to understand them because I had less capacity as well. True. Another thing that I always complain about these things is not having a little more economic power to be able to say, well, see, Dr. Zuniga in Peru, doctor, tomorrow I'm going to see him. Wait for me. I'll take the plane and I'll come back and come with me. I want to measure this skull and that one and so on. Or go to the Nazca plain and tell the famous Mario, say, well, Mario, I'm going to visit him and show me where the caves are. What do I know? But for scientists in Argentina, let's say that we are not middle class, we are not scientists with great economic power, and we have no support from anything. The universities do not contribute anything in this to be able to continue studying. So then you do what you can. But I keep complaining about it because I would like to get more measurements. Two years or so, I think that if it continues, it is pending. Come on, I think it's going to change a little, and I suppose that you, who are the most specialized in this and who have spent the most time studying this, in this specialty, would be one of the first who should be called, honestly, I tell you, when funds are obtained, because there are others too. This. Who have not wanted to touch the case. I know who they are and everything. And, well, I also understand them because of all the misinformation that there has been about the false bodies that were built. That scares anyone who does not know the case and that you have not investigated it well, right? Look, if I prolong the question a little, I believe that you have to respect the laws of each country if you want the laws of your country to be respected, right? I mean, that's simple with everything but until that country realizes it, because these are difficult things, you have to make a consensus of one country, something very complicated so that the way of seeing things changes. If it were that easy, the countries would be perfect. There would be no hunger in the world. There would be no wars. Well, then on the one hand, we have to respect what each country says. So I have to respect what Peru says about its mummies, 2009. Now, in the meantime, with an X-ray that they send me, I'm taking things out. I mean, I don't want to stay still either. That is why we have to find a way. We have to find a way until the legality is established to work accordingly. But in the meantime, other types of studies can be done without altering the legality of the country, and conclusions can be reached. At least, as I told you at the beginning, by just putting angles, that the angles are the same everywhere in the world. Well, I achieved minimal things, important or not, but I achieved small conclusions. And how come I persist, you see, in saying, and I say it in the book, I said it when I went there to the Chamber of Deputies, for me, they are our descendants who are going to come in the future when we are no longer here. And until now, I can't get out of that because every time I do the measurement again, it doesn't matter. So I don't need to have to go violate a law in Peru that says that they cannot be studied in that way. Send me an X-ray, send me a tomography, send me some measurements. The measurements are more relative. Well, I would like to take them out myself, Zweitasendein. But something can be done in the meantime, that is not sit idly waiting for the laws to change so that one can do the things, let's say, that one wants to do in that country. So, CEOs. Measuring the mummy, I think that's where the Peruvian government is coming from, to say that they are stolen artifacts and all this because they don't want to accept that they are real. And from there, the government takes hold to be able to accuse the people who wanted to remove the bodies or who want to do this type of studies. And that's why you can't get to what you're looking for, which is more access, right? Also, yes, but I repeat again, if direct access is not allowed, there is indirect inaccess. For me, at least for me, maybe those who don't do my specialty find it difficult or don't like it or won't achieve the same thing. But I tell you, I'm calm until now. I don't need Peru to tell me we are going to give you permission. Yes, to go see her. I wish they would give me permission to go see it and measure it. But if not, send me a photo. I'll see what I'm doing here. Send me an X-ray, especially the X-ray, the internal part, because when I go to look at the outside, I don't see anything. On the other hand, inside the X-ray shows me all the biology. What human being is going to be able to imitate nature or imitate the hand of God, which is the same thing? Then you get into the skull inside, and this is anyone capable of doing this? No one is capable of doing that, Yusan. No one is capable of imitating a biological skull that I can measure and match. And to top it off, it gives me mathematical numerical data pasted and evolved from men's numerical data. It is a numerical continuity. I don't realize that the man had an acute angle and this one has a flat angle, for example. I don't know how sharp it is, a little sharper or a little less sharp, but it's close. I don't get the opposite of the man. And well, with that, until the others agree, I think we have to stop fighting and arguing a little too, because time is wasted. When I don't argue with someone who tells me no, that this is how it is, that they are dolls, we'll talk about it with others. I have no time, because it's true, I don't have time. What I want is to get to the truth, and there is no time, at least for me. And it's already costing me a lot, and so many things that one has to see and review. And I've been doing this my whole life. And maybe if I had done it when I was young, I wouldn't be able to do it myself. because I have had to learn a lot of things before to be able to do this. It arrived right on time, so except in this, I have been lucky in other things, not in life, but in this one, at least I was lucky about that. But that's why I say I don't argue with people. I respect everything. There are many people who complain they don't know anything. They do it due to a series of fear, stress, one series of things more typical of human beings than we have them. And others will do it, let's say, from a scientific mismanagement, because perhaps correcting the form of criticism with a scientific method that opposes it, then there we are doing science. And they don't put things that way. Well, they are ways of being. So here there is no one perfect. Here there is no one who knows more. Here there is perseverance of study. Here there is that. For my part, I spend my time studying 6 or 8 hours a day. Even today that I am retired, I can't stop doing that because I feel bad when I don't grab a book and measure something. I'm looking around in my house, going back and forth to see what I can measure, right? And that is because I have lived my entire life that way. And well, I had to be a doctor like that. And well, I have assumed it. So there is no one perfect, no one who knows more than another, simply how each person dedicates themselves to achieve knowledge. And in that, I repeat, I do not argue with those people. I do not even have time. I do not directly touch my ears. I go the other way and continue with my things well. Because every time I argue, I lose. Measuring a new theory, confirm. So time is money. Time is money. Yes, yes, yes. Doctor, thank you very much. You have no idea. I would like us to talk again when you have time. I hope you had a good time. Yes, yes, perfect. And then we talk about other different things. And if you want, I will give you updates on how the case is going because I am following it very closely. And so thank you very much. Anything you want to promote? Anything, any message you have for the audience that you want to tell them? Well, not for professionals. I simply a concept that Yusan, we give a little more value to human life. Many times there are some who, they are smarter than us. These mummies come from the Pleiades, they come from Ganymede, they come from another constellation, and in the middle they leave aside human capacity. I always say that Yusan have an intelligence not superior to ours, but different. And that intelligence developed for the environment where they live, just as we develop our intelligence for the environment that we have, which we are already destroying. So let's say that we have to be a little tolerant in that and see that the best way to do all this is the knowledge technique, little by little studying, tolerant of those who don't know because they didn't have the opportunity or saw things differently. More so, if we are doctors, we have an ethical obligation to do those things. So all I can say is that, well, let's take care of ourselves, human life a little, because we see in this mummy that human evolution marks us, that we are going badly. It is marking us that the times to come are going to be terrible. The earth is not going to be the same as it is now, and that it is going to know what they have to do for them to survive in the future, then have a little more awareness of taking care of the life of things, not only of human beings, but of all the life of the earth, 2000, both plant, animal, and mineral as well. So perhaps I am saying it a little late to this because we are already going down the ravine. The earth is already sick and we have made it sick, right? The earth is a body that has a life of its own, and well, we have not taken care of it. So I'm not the one to say many things, but what occurs to me is to say that you said how little is left, let's take care of it because we are going badly. And thanks to this mummy, we are becoming aware of what land we are going to leave for the future. Wow. Thank you very much, Doctor. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks a lot. Likewise, very revealing, very exciting. I love having these types of conversations and more with people who know about the subject, who are trained. I love that. So I really appreciate your time and I hope to see you soon. I am at your disposal and you have already seen that they touch me a little and I start to talk. I love it. I love it. Normally I'm not like that, but hey, there would be many more topics to talk about these things logically with more time. I am willing. Let me know when you want and we can continue this talk with things or topics that we have not discussed now that we can discuss later. That seems perfect to me. Thank you very much, Dr. Piotti. Be very well. Greetings from Argentina. And it has really been an honor for me that you report to me in this way and well, and that it gives importance to what one may think is not my objective, but that I hope it serves some purpose. That is a small effort that can be made in favor of everything. Thank you very much, Doctor, and thank you all for watching us. Remember to subscribe, like, and comment on what you thought of Doctor.